The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving a soft orange glow over the sleepy coastal village. Jamar wiped his calloused hands on his shorts and picked up his guitar, a battered, patched-up thing held together with yellowing tape and stubborn strings. Every crack and dent told a story. The nights he slept with it beside him, the days it fell off the table, the storms that threatened to ruin it. Yet, somehow, it still sang when he strummed it. He sat on a weathered wooden crate under a flickering streetlight, the same light that had illuminated his first timid attempts at singing. The narrow alley smelled of salt, smoke, and the faint aroma of his mother's cooking from the house nearby. A small crowd of neighborhood kids gathered around, leaning against walls, sitting on crates, even crouching on the sandy ground. They didn't know much about music, but they recognized talent when they heard it. Jamar closed his eyes, inhaled, and began to sing. The notes rose like the tide against the shore, rich, velvety, and heartbreakingly pure. Every word of Elvis Presley's classic came out with a depth that made the kids forget their scraped knees, the broken toys, and the tiredness of a long day. Even old neighbors paused their chores to listen, captivated by a voice that seemed far too big for such a small place. When he finished, the alley was silent for a heartbeat before erupting into claps, cheers, and laughter. Jamar opened his eyes, cheeks flushed, and offered a shy grin. Inside, he was bursting with something he had never dared to name: hope. For a moment, the weight of poverty, the endless chores, the constant struggle of life on the coast all fell away. In that tiny street, with his broken guitar and his unstoppable voice, Jamar felt like he could sing to the world itself, and maybe, just maybe, the world would listen. The humid afternoon hung heavy over the village, and the cicadas droned like a steady heartbeat. Jamar had finished helping his father mend a fishing net and wandered toward the corner of the barangay where the narrow alley caught the last rays of sun. He slung his patched guitar over his shoulder, unaware that his life was about to shift in ways he had only dreamed of. A foreign tourist stumbled through the alley, camera in hand, capturing the everyday scenes of village life: children running barefoot, women carrying baskets of fish, and elders gossiping on doorsteps. Then, he stopped. From a distance, a voice drifted, strong, velvet, impossibly alive. It sang Elvis Presley with a depth that transcended imitation. He adjusted his camera and focused, realizing that the boy in front of him, no older than 17, was not just singing, he was performing with the soul of someone who had lived 1,000 lifetimes. The man recorded a short clip, careful not to disturb the moment. Jamar's eyes were closed, fingers dancing over the cracked strings, completely unaware of the world beyond his alley. The tourist couldn't believe what he had captured: a raw, unpolished voice that carried heartbreak, hope, and dreams far bigger than the boy's tiny barangay. Later that evening, the video went online with a simple caption: "This kid is the future Elvis." It spread like wildfire. Within hours, thousands of comments poured in, strangers from around the globe marveling at his voice. Some cried, some laughed with disbelief. Jamar, meanwhile, returned home, exhausted but happy, completely unaware that his simple afternoon performance had set the stage for a journey that would take him far beyond the shores of his village, straight into the hearts of millions who had never even known his name. And somewhere deep inside, even before he realized it, a spark ignited, the quiet understanding that maybe, just maybe, the world was ready to listen. The morning sun glinted off the water as Jamar's father untangled nets by the shore. Jamar sat nearby, guitar in hand, his thoughts still lingering on the stranger with the camera. Suddenly, a black SUV rumbled down the dusty path, kicking up clouds of sand. Out stepped two people, foreigners with crisp suits and confident smiles. The entire neighborhood paused, curiosity buzzing through the air like electricity. They introduced themselves as producers from an international talent show. They had seen the video online and wanted Jamar to audition. For a moment, the words didn't sink in. Audition, overseas, them wanting me. He stared at the ground, afraid he might be dreaming. His mother's eyes welled up as she clutched her apron, trembling. His father, usually stoic and weathered from years at sea, placed a rough hand on Jamar's shoulder. "Take this," he said, handing him a small lanyard with a charm he had found washed ashore years ago. For luck. The preparations were surreal. A passport hastily obtained, a suitcase packed with the few clothes he owned, and a guitar carefully wrapped in cloth. The airport was unlike anything Jamar had imagined: lights flashing, announcements echoing, people rushing in all directions. He gripped his father's hand tightly before letting go to walk toward the departure gate. Each step felt like crossing into another world, one full of opportunity and fear intertwined. On the plane, he stared out at the endless ocean below, thinking about the alleyways of his village, the flickering streetlight, and the small audience that had once cheered for him. That voice, which had grown from whispers under a street lamp to notes that could captivate millions, carried him forward. Jamar knew that the world outside was vast and unknown, but inside him, a fire had been lit, a fire that would not be dimmed by distance, language, or fear. The boy from the Philippine coast was ready to be heard. The theater was colossal, a world away from the narrow streets of Jomar's village. Thousands of bright lights blazed overhead, and cameras recorded every angle. Backstage, contestants hurried, some rehearsing, others nervously pacing. Jamar sat quietly in a corner, clutching his patched guitar. His heart pounded, and his stomach twisted in knots, but beneath it all, a steady calm hummed, a quiet certainty that his voice had brought him this far. When the announcer called his name, the world seemed to shrink. Stepping onto the stage, the blinding lights made him squint, but the roar of the audience didn't scare him. It was unfamiliar, yes, but it was also like standing under that streetlight in his barangay, only multiplied 1,000 times. He strummed the opening chords, and the first note that escaped his lips was velvet and haunting, echoing through the theater like a tide against stone. The judges leaned forward. The audience fell silent. Each word, each inflection, carried a lifetime of struggle, hope, and unspoken dreams. Elvis, yes, but more than Elvis, Jamar had infused his own story into every note. He sang with a raw power that transcended language, poverty, and distance. Faces on the judges' panel betrayed shock, awe, and disbelief. One judge, normally composed and notoriously critical, had tears glistening at the corners of his eyes. By the final chord, the theater erupted into a standing ovation. Cameras flashed, lights pulsed, and even the other contestants stared in stunned admiration. A judge whispered under her breath, voice trembling, "This kid isn't the future Elvis, he's something the world has never heard before." For Jamar, it was more than applause, it was validation, a proof that the countless nights under flickering streetlights, the broken guitar, and the whispered dreams had not been in vain. For the first time, he realized that his voice could not just reach hearts, it could move the world. The next morning, Jamar woke to a world that seemed both familiar and impossibly vast. His phone, previously an alien device he rarely touched, was flooded with notifications. Millions had seen the clip of his performance. News outlets from Asia to America called him the Filipino Elvis, the teen who reborn rock and roll, and the voice that shook the internet. His social media accounts exploded with messages of admiration, encouragement, and disbelief. Fans sent drawings, letters, and videos of themselves singing along to his rendition. Despite the whirlwind, Jamar remained grounded. He returned to his coastal village, where the salty air and the rhythmic waves reminded him of who he was and where he came from. The narrow alleyways, the flickering streetlight, and the patched guitar had not changed, but now, everyone in the neighborhood looked at him differently. Children followed him like he was a hero. Elders nodded with pride, murmuring stories of how far a single dream could go. Even with all the fame and attention, Jamar stayed humble. He helped his father repair nets, sang for local children under the same streetlight, and shared meals with neighbors who had supported him quietly for years. But now, whenever he sang, the world was listening. He had become proof that poverty, hardship, and circumstance could not limit the power of talent and determination. At night, under the familiar glow of the streetlight, Jamar strummed his guitar and smiled. The applause, the viral videos, the headlines, they were incredible, but what mattered most was that his voice had found its place in the world. Somewhere deep inside, he felt a quiet satisfaction. The boy who once sang for an audience of a few neighbors had shocked the world, and the fire in his heart promised that this was only the beginning.